people are becoming increasingly aware of the harms of extreme economic inequality, which may be contributing to some of the destabilizing social and political tensions. Politicians and charities have been sounding the alarm in recent years about the negative impacts on health and welfare that are being felt around the world. Global business and political elites, however, have been focused on risks to security and economic growth that they believe could be mitigated by increased automation. Media and religious commentators have been expressing concern over the unprecedented level of inequality that exists within the world's richest countries. In a recent report, it was revealed that 28 billionaires own as much as the combined wealth of the poorest half of the world. Extreme economic inequality has been on the rise across the world. In fact, some analysts have argued that this recent spike in inequality is one of the most important factors driving the global refugee crisis. Ben Phillips has reported in his recent book that the gap between the rich and poor in many countries has become significantly larger over the past 30 years. He argues that it is crucial to take action on this issue with focused efforts, because 7 out of 10 people live in countries where the gap between rich and poor is greater than it was 30 years ago. Today, inequality is not only explicit but also obscene. This is quite complicated. The roots of capitalism date back to the Roman Empire. Colonialism began in Europe, and so on. There are many definitions of capitalism, but by one definition, capitalism is a mode of production in which goods and services are produced for profit. More specifically, it is the set of economic and social relations by which production, distribution, and exchange are carried out. Capitalism has existed since ancient times, from the Roman Empire to colonialism, and it's still prevalent today. The complexity in tackling the means of ripples through in a number of ways. However, one of the less discussed topics in workplace equality is a topic that can be a relatively low-hanging fruit if only people become more aware of it: wage income equality at work. This can be something that is easily measured, but it requires some effort from the management side to make sure this metric is being accurately reported and understood by employees. One way of measuring this is by comparing the average worker's salary to the average boss's salary. In 1965, an average company CEO in the US would get around 20 times more than the average worker, according to a study by the Economic Policy Institute. By 1989, this had risen to 58 to 1. By 2018, this figure had increased even further, and the average worker needed 278 days to earn what their boss received in one day. While worker wages stagnated since the 1980s, executives had their pay skyrocket with CEO compensation, including pay and stock options, increasing by over 1,000% since 1978 and 339% since 2018. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American worker's wages increased by less than 12%, adjusted for inflation. Though some workers are seeing more money at their disposal, most are not. The average hourly pay for a worker in America increased from $22.71 in 2007 to $23.82 in 2018, but that's still only an increase of 3% over 13 years. 2017 also marked the second consecutive year that U.S. workers have seen an increase in their average wages. This makes it the third time in the last 4 years that wages have increased in the United States, which is a significant improvement from 2015, when workers saw no increase in their average wages. To fight back against the raise, many workers are protesting their salaries, but this has led to a number of labor disagreements. In the U.S., pay equality is worst in the workplace, but there is a pattern of unequal pay in other countries as well. There are many reasons to suspect that this may be due to the tendency for men and women to gravitate towards different fields and roles in their work. With the rise of neoliberalism, deregulation and privatization over the last few decades, unions have been weakened and collective bargaining has been made more difficult as a result. It is clear that as neoliberalism, deregulation and privatization sweep the world, unions must be strengthened to ensure that working-class people maintain their power. The growth of a high-paid finance sector also had a part to play. The financial sector today is like a new industry, with a high-paid workforce and excellent career prospects. This sector has seen a massive growth since the 2008 recession, and it's continuing to climb. According to Statista, in 2018, the countries with the biggest pay gap, after the US, were India 229 to 1, UK 201 to 1, South Africa 180 to 1, and the Netherlands 152 to 1. China came 10th 127 to 1. The pay gap is a problem plaguing the world today. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening in most countries, with most people at the bottom earning less than half of what people at the top make. The inequality in income between men and women also continues to exist, with men having roughly 3 times more money than women. When we drill down into specific international brands, it becomes more shocking. Take, for example, the situation with Gap Inc., which pays its CEO $47 million, while the company's median employee makes $34,000. The recent report in Bloomberg showed the inequality in CEO pay in the United States. The report also showed that Arconic CEO Alcoa received a 934 times higher pay than the average worker, while McDonald's CEO Mark Wirt received 1,939 times more. The difference in these two CEOs is absolutely staggering. It does not have to be this way. In the 1940s, the government enacted Social Security and unemployment insurance programs that helped to reduce income inequality. In the 1960s, women gained a stronger foothold in society with their participation in the labor force. In the 1970s, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, he advocated for free trade policies that disadvantaged minorities and unions. A new study by the World Bank reveals that Brazil's economic growth has been driven by the increase in wages for the poorest social class and women, who have seen greater increases in their income than men. The study further shows that the poorest social class has seen a 5-fold increase in their incomes over the decade. The conversation about the gender pay gap has been ongoing for years, yet this issue is still plagued with misinformation and stereotypes. Find out how to reduce this inequality in your company or in society at large. Advising the UK government in 2011 on fair pay in the public sector, Will Hutton of the Work Foundation made a recommendation in a report that no boss should be paid more than 20 times the salary of the lowest paid worker. This change in policy has been opposed by many, who argue that it will discourage investment and lead to lower productivity. But some people have a far simpler and more radical solution. Just pay everybody the same. Summa, the food co-op based in Yorkshire, UK, has long had equal pay for all. Mondragon, the massive Spanish co-op, has just 2 pay grades: worker and shareholder. Structure. In the mid-1980s, many organizations began to move from a graded pay system to a more equal pay structure. These organizations were committed to eliminating inequalities in pay between men and women across all levels of their workforce. Despite the current climate, equal pay for women is still a viable cause. According to a recent study by the Institute for Compensation Studies, companies that offer equal pay are 30% more likely to have women in their top management positions. In the workplace, power is often distributed unequally, and this can be a cause of frustration for those who have to take orders from those with higher status. In today's work world, people are starting to feel more engaged and responsible due to a shift in power. The word output can be a very powerful and important word. It is used to describe the results of a process, whether that process is a business, an art project, or anything else. A writer's work is what they produce. This may mean writing for their own enjoyment or writing for public consumption, such as blogs and articles. In this way, output becomes more than what you produce. Economic inequality has been a major issue in the American workforce for many years. This issue undermines the principles of equal worth and dignity and destroys the sense of community and shared prosperity society has relied on for generations. Wage equality may be the only way to bring sanity back into a world that is hooked on hierarchical delusions of superiority and inferiority. Wage equality will create havens of health and sanity by allowing people to feel less powerless in their own lives, practice self-care, and have more time for themselves.